Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast. I am your host, Sarah, and I am so excited for today's episode because there is an interview with author Jasmine Silvera, author of a book called Death's Dancer. It was a lot of fun, and I'm so excited to share the interview with you because she is really interesting and really engaging and a lot of fun. She was a lot of fun to interview, so I hope she's a lot of fun for you to listen to as well. I'm sure she will be. Her book, Death's Dancer, is her debut novel, and let me give you a little synopsis of it. Isela Vogel dances on borrowed time. A degenerative hip threatens her successful career, bringing the favor of the gods to her patrons. Now, one big job could set her up for life, if it doesn't get her killed. The necromancer Azrael must harness the power of a god to stop a killer, and that requires a dancer. Capricious gods and scheming necromancers are the least of Isela's worries. If she and Azrael fail, it will cost more than her life. If they succeed, she will lose everything she loves. And then there's the danger of falling for a lord of death. So that's the synopsis for Death's Dancer, the debut novel by author Jasmine Silvera. It's great. It's a mixture of romance, fantasy, obviously fantasy with gods, dancers, and necromancers, and a little bit of mystery because there is a mystery. They are trying to solve some supernatural kind of murders, and Jasmine herself is going to tell you a little bit more about the book in the interview, so I won't give too much away. I really enjoyed this book. When I first read the blurb on the back, I thought, oh, that's kind of odd, a little interesting. I was intrigued because it's fantasy, which is a genre that I love, but it didn't sound like any fantasy book that I had read before, and so I was excited about that. And it does have elements of traditional fantasy. There are some shapeshifters, there are some witches, things like that, but it's really different from any other fantasy book that I have read. And she creates this great world and these interesting characters, these detailed and well-created characters, and this world in which they inhabit, and brings them to life in a way that is fun. It's intriguing. This book will suck you in, and you will be interested to know exactly where it's going, exactly what's going to happen. So I didn't want to put it down. I kept having to put it down to go do other things, but I really, really enjoyed this book, and I think you will too. So that is my very quick spiel about Death's Dancer by Jasmine Silvera. Rather than me talking about it, I would love to let you listen to Jasmine talk about it herself and give you her insights and what she goes through in her writing process and how she created some of these characters and the story. So without further ado, here is my interview with Jasmine Silvera via Skype from her home in Seattle.
Hello, Jasmine. Thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me, Sarah.
Great. So before we get started talking about your writing and your book, just go ahead and tell my readers a little bit, whatever you're comfortable sharing about yourself.
Well, let's see. I was born in California, but I currently live in Seattle with my husband and our 2-year-old daughter. Both of my parents worked in education, so I had no choice but to love reading and writing. Actually, I just have always loved it, and I wrote my first story in 4th grade about a sentient Christmas tree, and I just haven't looked back. So I'm currently a full-time mom, editor, and writer, and but I also teach yoga, and I do some photography.
Okay, great. Thank you. A sentient Christmas tree. What, did it have an adventure?
Well, it was the kind of what happens to the tree after Christmas.
Oh.
Sort of. I gave it a second life.
Oh, nice.
Story.
So you started writing in 4th grade, and then was it something that you wanted to do professionally? Did you know you wanted to grow up and be a writer, or?
No, I mean, I sort of figured it was never going to happen as like a full-time writer for a job, but I've always loved it. And I didn't even really think about publishing until I was in my 20s and I went to a writer's workshop. And all of a sudden I met all these other people who were like writing short stories and publishing them. And, there was this whole idea of, you can, maybe I don't know if I can make a career out of it, but I can at least do it on the side. So I kind of, at that point, started looking. I think that also changed how I looked at my writing. Instead of it being like just something I did when I was inspired and sitting down and, pouring out my heart and the tortured artist, I really started to see writing as a craft and something you could develop. And the more you worked at it, the better you got at it. And the importance of having beta readers and feedback and critique. And that you could actually improve something, and something was done, but also, you could say it was done, but then you could look at it again and revise it and change it and improve it. So at that point, I started to look at writing as a craft and as something, and looking at the path to being published, and what that would take to bring my writing to that level.
Okay. So you mentioned, instead of just writing when you kind of felt like it, do you have a writing schedule, or do you have a way of writing that you try to stick to?
Yeah, I think at various points of my life, it's been, more or less of a schedule. It's hard having, well, I have a 2-year-old, so for the last 2 years, it's been kind of catch as catch can. As she gets older, I'm able to sort of really have days of the week and times of the day that I sit down and write. I pretty much try at the beginning of the week, set out some goals, whether it's a word count or a chapter that I want to write or fix, and then kind of just get to that, check that goal off the list. I'm a person who loves to-do lists, so if I can organize my writing around creating to-dos, I've been very successful doing it that way. So I tend to write better in the morning. I'll get up a little early and do some of my just kind of drafting writing, and then I edit better in the afternoon and the evening, which is great because after bedtime I have a little bit of time to sit and rework some of the things I worked on earlier in the day, or look at the story overall and do some structural things. So kind of knowing what I have time for, and then not being too hard on myself if I miss a day because we just moved. So there are some days where I just don't even have the brain space to write. I just try to make it up and a couple of days later. And it helps having a really supportive partner who understands how important it is to get the writing time in, because if I don't get it in, he knows. He's like, you need to go away for a couple of hours, and kind of sets me off in the room to go do my thing. So that's been great. Yeah,
that's really helpful. Talk a little bit about Death's Dancer.
Yeah, so Death's Dancer is kind of a culmination of a couple of different ideas I've had rolling around in my head for a while. I have a background, I'm not a dancer, but I do love to salsa, which is a kind of dance, also with chips. I love that too. But I teach yoga, so I've always really wanted to incorporate body movement into the story, and I knew I didn't want to specifically have yoga. I love ballet, but I didn't really want to have a more like a traditional ballet kind of story. And there's a sequence of postures in a yoga practice. Anybody who's been to a couple of vinyasa classes will recognize the Warrior 2, Warrior 3, Warrior 1, and together that sequence is referred to sometimes as the dancing warrior. So I just thought that's such an evocative image, and it's really beautiful to practice. It feels really great, and I thought, so I started doing some research about dance and culture and communication and religion. And it just is a lot of similarities in cultures and religions, and the way that movement and music is kind of used to either express your belief and your religion, communicate, storytell. And so then it was just a short hop to a speculation of, well, what if you could literally communicate with gods through dance? And what if there was a pattern of dancing that became a language? So that was that piece of it. And then the other piece was we did live in Prague for about 2 years. And Prague is this incredible city in Europe. It's really relatively untouched by a lot of the damage during World War II. It's got this very rich history of conflict and changing of hands and a lot of political uprising and unrest and changeover. And it's just a really evocative city to be in. It also has this really great background of being a place of magic where alchemists came way, way back during the time of Rudolf, when Prague was the capital city of Bohemia and the kind of the center of the Bohemian Empire. All of these alchemists came, and alchemy is about transforming one thing into another thing, and there's a lot of just this rich history of magic and kind of woo, in the city. So, to put it technically, woo.
That's right.
So all of those things kind of came together at once, and I'm in the city, and I'm thinking about movement, and I, was thinking about necromancing, which is this idea that you can communicate with the dead. So it's just more forms of communication, and necromancers get a bad rap, right? They all look all skeletal and scary, and everybody's afraid of them. And so I thought, well, let's turn that guy into essentially a hero, protagonist, and then let's take somebody who does this dance and see, the plot kind of came together through that. So NaNoWriMo came up, National Novel Writing Month, and I met an American friend in Prague who participates every year, and so she kind of urged me to give it a go again that year after a couple of years of not doing it. And I had two ideas. I had one very serious kind of straight-up fiction, and then I had this really fun speculative fiction, urban fantasy thing, and I said, Beth, what do I do? And she said, do the fun one. It's only a month. If you hate what comes out of it, you never have to touch it again. So Death Dancer came out of that. And I blazed through about 90,000 words in a month. I wasn't working, so that helped. And I had a complete draft, I think, by the end of November. And I was like, okay, there's something here. So Let's look it out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating because it's definitely, it has elements of supernatural, kind of paranormal that you read in other types of fantasy novels. But it was a really unique storyline with really unique characters. I appreciated that about it. And so tell us a little bit about the main characters, Isela and Azrael.
Yeah, so the story is essentially Isela Vogel is a gods dancer, and she basically makes a living dancing for gods, and she does that through this dance that communicates a request from her patron. The request is then responded to divinely, and she gets paid. So she's had a very successful career of doing this, but she also has a bum hip. And so this hip is going to end her ability to dance professionally kind of prematurely. So she takes this one big job, this kind of last job to close out her career. So this final job, the problem with this last job is that the new patron is the allegiance of necromancers. And so these are 8 very powerful necromancers who essentially control the world. And the newest member of their group, Azrael, has been charged with finding a killer. So there's some supernatural killer roaming the streets of Prague. He needs to find out who that is. So they believe that he will need the help of God to do that, and so that requires him to have a dancer. So he is not convinced that he needs a dancer to help, or that he needs any help at all, and she doesn't trust him, but they're forced to work together. And so this is the kind of where we kick off is she's taken the job, and they're tracking this killer through the streets of Prague, and it kind of reveals to her some secrets about her own family that she didn't know, the world that she doesn't know that she really lives in, and then it brings them together romantically also.
It does, but they're not, they kind of get thrown together in, sort of that way that often happens in romances, the very different worlds brought together by an outside force, but they don't immediately, have this, ooh, it's not one of those romances of, hey, let's just fall into bed together. She is very stubborn, which I appreciate, and very, she's got her set of rules that she's going to live by, and he is very annoyed with her a lot because she won't just fall into line. So talk a little bit about their relationship in those terms.
Yeah, so I think what's really common in this genre is this idea of fated mates, or, you're destined to be together. And that is, I understand that in a way because it's a way of equalizing the power dynamic when you have one character who's supernatural and are really powerful and or immortal, and then you have a human. What would bring the two of them together and make that sort of equal is that the supernatural character, usually the he, is, for some reason, she's the one for him, and he cannot resist the pull, and
Right.
They're drawn together because they're meant to be together. And there's really romantic about that, and I love some of those stories too. But what excited me about these two was the challenges that they're not fated to be together. They're choosing to be together through the story and through the things that happen to them, and as they encounter the plot points, and realizing that they can trust each other, that they both bring strengths to the situation that the other one doesn't have, and that really by working together, it's the best chance they have to survive, and also that they're finding they respect each other. And so it's this act of choosing one another kind of over and over again, which for me, like after the happily ever after, and, I think anybody who's been married or been in a long-term relationship knows is that, love is a verb. You have to keep kind of continually choosing your partner every day and to prioritize them. And I wanted to have that aspect to their relationship that, they're used to being independent. They're used to being their own people. They're very stubborn in their own ways. And they learn to both need each other, but also really respect each other, I hope, by the end. And that kind of glues them together. Not just that, there's a scroll of prophecy that says that they're meant to be together to rule the world kind of thing, which is, its own fun, but it's not what I was trying to do here.
And I hate to interrupt the interview, but we do have to take our first break of the podcast. So when we come back, we will be talking more with author Jasmine Silvera, and we'll be talking about the follow-up book to Death's Dancer. So stay tuned, and we will be right back.
Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
Welcome back to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast. We are talking with author Jasmine Silvera, author of Death's Dancer. So let's get back to the interview.
And there is an excerpt at the end of Death's Dancer for the next book. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Is it the same world? Are the same characters? I don't want to give away the ending of this book or anything, but you want to talk about the next?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that they wind up together. I don't do cliffhangers, and I don't really do a lot of tragic endings. Mm-hmm. So, at the end of the day, there is happily ever after. But I think book 2 gets into the after, okay. And the complexities that they both experience now based on how the book ends, which I won't tell you because I think that, but I won't spoil it. Right. Is that the dynamic that allows them to remain together significantly changes the relationship, I think. And in one way it puts them on more equal ground, but in another way creates some challenges. Mm-hmm. So I think, book 2 really gets into that relationship, also exploring kind of what happens to, so Isela's family is involved in this book. Part of the backstory is that they are Americans who moved to Prague during a period of as refugees, basically. And there's some world building around that. But so her family comes into play. Mm-hmm. There's a big revelation about them in the first book, and without spoiling it, that they're going to have a bigger role in the second book, as well as the allegiance coming back. Kind of, they're not quite done yet with mm-hmm. the two of them. So, it's a revision. It's revisiting the same world, and a lot of characters I hope that people enjoyed. We'll get to see again, but also. Really trying to build the world out a little bit, mm-hmm. Because I realized that the first book is really tight around the two of them and this murder, and there's this huge world going on around them that's changed the dynamic of, it's essentially like our world, but there's been a significant historic event that has changed the dynamic the supernatural is existing with the humanity. And so book 2 will kind of get into the rest of the world around them a little bit more, I think.
Okay. Do you have a publication date on book 2?
I have a late fall release date, and I don't have a number yet.
Okay,
so.
late fall. Well, that
late
at least...
fall this year.
Okay, cool. And then what are you working on now? Anything new, or are you just chasing the 2-year-old mostly?
I'm packing.
Yes.
I'm unpacking boxes. So we just moved. So yeah, I am literally unpacking boxes. But I'm still working. I'm actually have started the first draft of I think a little bit more closer to our world fantasy, kind of more in the vein of the urban fantasy that I grew up with, like Charles DeLent and Emma Bull, where it's more of, very close to our world with just very kind of interesting supernatural happenings. And that's about it centers around a series. It's a series, and it will center around a group of musicians and shapeshifters that live in a small town in the Sierra Nevada in California.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you. You mentioned in one of the emails before we had the interview about the Kindle. Let me make sure I get it right. The Kindle, Amazon's Kindle Scout program. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So Amazon used to have this contest every year called the Breakthrough Novel Award, and it was a big thing in the industry. It was kind of a neat idea that they would kind of crowdsource books and bubble one up. That kind of went the way of the dodo, I think, in 2013, and it was replaced by this Kindle Scout program, which is, I think, really fun and a really neat idea. Basically, what it is it crowdsources the decision-making around what books get published by asking the authors to submit a completed manuscript with a cover and blurb and everything, and it puts up a web page with that information and about a 3,000-word sample, so maybe the first couple of chapters of your book. And then it asks people to read it and vote on it. And for a 30-day period, this campaign page, they call it live, and you can promote it. And they send it out to their scouts and ask people to vote. Do you like this book? Would you want to read the rest? At the end of the 30 days, that feedback from the voters is compiled with their editorial feedback, and then they decide whether or not to offer a contract. So Kindle Scout... or Death Dancer, rather, was published through this Kindle Scout program. And Kindle Press, which is the actual publishing arm, then offers the contract, and they do a professional edit, and then they publish the book. And then they publish an ebook version, so I've been doing a print run myself, which has been a lot of fun, and it's taught me a lot about being an indie author. But I do have a great backing from support from Amazon in terms of getting the book out there to readers. So that's been a really exciting process and project that they're doing now.
Oh, that's really interesting. I did a little bit of reading on it before, but it sounds like a fascinating process. Kind of scary to put your work out there and let people vote on it.
yeah, it's nerve-wracking. I think what's great about it, though, is that it gives you a sense of what people respond to, and it's a very short turnaround. So traditionally in the industry, and I'm sure you've heard these stories of people who have sent their books out to agents or editors, and it may take 3 months or 6 months or a year, or you never hear anything, and you can do that really for years and years. And I think of these the more famous authors, Stephen King and J.K. Rowling, who talk about having rejection notices in the 40s and 50s and 60s before publishing anything, and for me that equates to years of time. Mm-hmm. So what I like about this program is that it's 45 days. You get your manuscript, you tip top shape, you get a professionally designed cover, you do the blurb. So again, you have control over your cover, which I loved because it was very important to me to have a cover that represented who I thought the characters were for the book, mm-hmm. And I definitely didn't design it myself. I go to a professional who takes my ideas and then does something even more incredible than I could think of with them. And then in 45 days, So you have a 30-day campaign, and they have 15 days after, and they tell you, yes, we want it, or no, we don't. And it kind of frees you up to work on other things or move on to something else, or if you want to self-publish it, you can self-publish it, or if you want to go the traditional route and trying to find an agent or an editor, you can do that. But this program is great because it shortens that timeline quite a bit, and so it really gives you more direct feedback right away.
Great. That's, like I said, it's really fascinating. I hadn't heard of it before, so thank you for sharing that. Let's talk about who you like as authors. Who do you like to read when you're not writing?
I guess I read everything. I'm a little bit of that person who's always standing in line with like a piece of paper, whatever. If I'm anywhere where I have to wait for more than 5 minutes, I need to have something to read. So
me too.
I love having the phone, the Kindle app on my phone,
yes.
or iBooks, and I can just like, ooh. Yes. So actually, right now, so I grew up reading fantasy and the old school urban fantasy. So Charles DeLint, Emma Bull. I read a ton of Robin McKinley. I loved like the sword and sorcery. I think now would be like YA fantasy, but that was totally my game when I was a kid. And then I got into more the social science fiction of Octavia Butler and Ursula Le Guin. And I used to sneak my grandma's Harlequins. Oh my gosh, she's going to kill me when I tell people that. So I've always been like squeezing a little romance in there on the side. But I never really enjoyed historical romance until I read this woman, Courtney Milan, who just has a really, really smart sensibility and also kind of an awareness of historical romance. So that's kind of where it came from. Now I read a lot of epic stuff. I feel like I'm catching up on all of the big epic fantasies that I skipped. So like Joe Abercrombie and Scott Lynch's Gentleman Bastards, which has been really, really great. If you like The Usual Suspects or Ocean's 11 in like fantasy setting, that's fantastic. I'm also reading a lot of graphic novels. The Monstrous series book by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takata as the illustrator. Mm-hmm. I mean, the art is gorgeous. It's very Art Deco. It's set in Asia, in a kind of like a steampunky Asia. And it's just beautiful to look at. And the storytelling is really like in media res, just puts you right in the middle of it, and lets you discover the world sort of as the plot is unfolding. So, I love that. It's, kind of a non-Western set fantasy. Really, really evocative. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What kind of books do you like to read with your daughter?
Oh, my gosh. So I love graphic novels, so I tend to pick a lot of her books that have the illustrators that I like. Mm-hmm. So there's a woman, Marla Frazee. I'm probably pronouncing her name wrong. Mm-hmm. She wrote a book. She illustrated a book called All the World, which was, I believe, a Caldecott or maybe selected book. The illustration is beautiful. So I have then picked up everything else she's ever illustrated. Mm-hmm. And then we read a lot of the good old standards. Sandra Boynton is a big favorite in our house. Anything Rhymes, the Good Night Construction Site is we're big fans of that one around here. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then my husband is German, so we're raising our daughter bilingually. So there's actually quite a few German kids' books going through our house. Little Pippi Longstocking, Pippi Longstrumpf in German, and what's the other? There's another series that Willy Das Ferkel, which is a little pig named Willy who gets into kind of barnyard adventures. So. Yeah.
Awesome. That just kind of actually came to me out of nowhere. I was like, what do you read with a 2.5-year-old when you're an author?
Everything. Anything she wants to read, basically,
right.
And
right.
That's opened me up to lots of books that I wouldn't have considered. But, and then we read a lot of things over and over and over again. So we can all, I think, recite Steam Train, Dream Train, kind of with our eyes closed. We prompt each other now. Yeah. So I say the first line, and then she says the second line, and then that's a big favorite.
That's awesome. I used to do daycare for a family, and the little guy's favorite book had no words. It was just a picture book, and it's called The Truck Book, and he would check it out of the library every time we went to the library. And if you didn't tell the story exactly the way you told the story before, he would remember.
Oh, those are great. I love those books. It's actually been a really interesting exercise for my storytelling. Because it's causing me to simplify a lot of my storytelling. I love books like that. There's one that we read, and the name is escaping me. Maybe it's just Snow. But the whole storyline is a little girl. She wakes up and it's snowing outside, and then they go outside, and there's like this, the process of going outside, and then they get out, and then it becomes this magical forest with all the kids playing in the snow with the dancing snowmen. And it's just a fun Thankfully, she doesn't insist that I tell it the same way every time yet, although I'm sure that's coming. That stage will come.
Yeah.
So right now it's been really fun for me to just sort of like practice telling it different ways, and can I get to the same ending with different storytelling, playing up different characters in the story. So it's been a good storytelling exercise for me, the writer. Who knew?
I've seen that book. It's really, I love the illustrations in it.
Unfortunately, I do have to interrupt one more time for our second break of the podcast, but when we come back, we will be concluding this interview with author Jasmine Silvera, so stay tuned and we will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast. Thank you for joining me, and we are going to conclude our interview with author Jasmine Silvera, author of her debut novel, Death's Dancer.
Is there anything else that you would like for people to know about you, about your books, anything along those lines? Anything we haven't covered?
Oh, gosh. God, I'm surprised I haven't talked to myself. I haven't talked to you out of 3 hours later. So
keep going.
Yeah. Well, I know. Like, what else can I tell you? I am really, when I tell stories, I guess I like to break through the idea of what a genre story is that you pick up. And I know we all like some predictability in our reading. You know, there are moments where we like to know that, this is why people read genre, right? You read a mystery novel because you know there'll be a crime, and you know it'll be solved at the end, and it'll all work out. You read a romance because you know that it winds up happy, and, people ride off into the sunset in whatever shape that takes. And also, to dig into romance a little bit, those happy endings are changing as our ideas of what happy ending expand to include more people. And to include different lifestyles, and to include the different ways that, the myriad ways that people find happiness together. And so that's been really exciting for me as a writer that likes to play in the romance genres, to read more romance and kind of see the difference between, of how, I think the kind of bodice ripper stereotype, and what all of that entails. To sort of these really more modern interpretations of, love, of romance, of happily ever after, of who gets a happy ever after. It's been really delightful to see more diverse settings and characters, and groups of people that are not traditionally featured in stories that have happily ever afters. I love that predictability, to kind of to backtrack a little. But I think I also like to work in the places where the lines cross a little bit, and it's fun to have a mystery that also involves some elements of romance, and I love, the fantasy, and to pull that in. So, I think the joy of being a writer in this day and age, especially now where, just Amazon, the genre walls are breaking down, so you can read mystery and fantasy and a little romance and have it all thrown into the same book. And it makes it easier to find books like that when you have, sites like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, where you can search, and they will help populate your feed with books that are like what you read, but also maybe a little bit different or one-off, or kind of take you in a different direction. kind of lost my train of thought.
That's okay. No, you were talking about, I get you. You're talking about genres and the crossing of genres.
Yeah. I think, we often, especially everybody's like, you're a geek or a nerd, you like science fiction, you like romance, so you're cat lady, you like a mystery, so you must be sitting at home in your easy chair watching SVU all day. And I think that limits people, and that's not, who we are is a lot bigger and more diverse than that, and so I think it's really great to see that being reflected in the books and the ways that we find books and are attracted to books, and then the books that me as a writer get to write, because I like to expand and explore too. It's really exciting.
Makes it a little harder for bookstores or libraries to categorize them, but I love that you can get, you can't quite decide what genre a book falls in.
I see the practical, I worked in the student library in college, and I see the practical difficulties of where do you put a book, and how that's kind of useful to help people find the book that they want to read. And there is something about knowing you can walk in and say, okay, I want this book, and it's going to be on this shelf. But I think in a lot of ways that also limited the books, especially that were published, and the way that the industry chose books to be published, because it had to fit, in the specific boundaries of what this genre was. And that extends to also who's writing it and who the story is about, so I think the genre borders can be beneficial in some way or helpful, but they also can be very limiting. And I find that, I think it's worth the sacrifice of maybe not being able to easily categorize a book to have a book or have access to books that are told by different people, about different people, that encompass a wider range of backgrounds that aren't just limited to one section because, the author is this, so it fits into this section, right? And because all of that says is that then it creates, it just creates these little lumps, and you can't break out of your lumps. And so a reader may say, oh, but I don't read those. And then I don't read that book or that kind of book or a book about that or a book written by that person. And so they may never have the chance to discover, too. And for me, the joy of being a reader is the discovery, right? And the idea that you get to live not just your own life, but multiple lives and experience different people's ways of seeing the world and different folks' experiences in the world. So I'm glad that sometimes I think I'm getting an apple, and I get an orange, or, I get a pomelo, or whatever. I think, there's room to explore and discover. It's like that book blind date thing. Have you ever seen those? Some of the bookstores do where they wrap a book up in paper.
Yeah,
and they just sort of give you a very basic, and then, you just throw a book.
Right.
Yeah.
I've never quite been brave enough to try that, but it seems fun.
I tend to, I do a lot of book recommendations. I get a lot of the books that I read based on recommendations, and I also happen to know a lot of writers.
Sure.
So I tend to read a lot in the circle of people that I know, which is a luxury I never imagined having. Like a whole bunch of writers and authors. It's so great. But it is really fun to just sort of walk around and just pick up something new and give it a try.
Yeah. Well, that's just what I'm discovering with this podcast, is that I get to read books that I might not have heard of before, and it's been a lot of fun. So
yeah, I also read a lot of nonfiction, and I think it's important as a fiction writer when you're doing world building. For me, it's what makes the fantastic really approachable is when you've got kind of real world details. So I do read quite a bit of nonfiction, and then I also just try to pull one real tactile sensory detail to add so that it feels like it's a real thing that could potentially happen, even though, there's a necromancer with dead in the other room or something.
Right.
Yeah. So drawing from those real concrete life experiences and knowledge is why I think it's important for genre readers to also be aware of the nonfiction world around them, and boy, if you know a writer, I'm sorry, you're going to wind up, some bit of you is going to get dragged and ground up into the mill, and you might find yourself on a page somewhere.
Nice.
Be warned. We should all wear a label on our head.
I think I've seen a meme on Facebook or a sign that says, oh, no, actually it was a friend of mine, my aunt's. I was at her house once when my aunt was house sitting, and she had a sign on her wall that said, "Be careful, you might end up in my next novel."
Right. I think it's especially dangerous if you know a mystery writer or a thriller writer, because you might end up dead in the next novel. So, yeah.
It's a way of...
And actually, I participate in a write-a-thon for Clarion West every year, which is a writer's workshop here in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the great it's basically a fundraising event for the workshop. But one of the things that they do is that writers will offer to tuckerize you. It's basically like they'll find a way to put you in the story. And one of Ian McDonald's is a really great writer. He's been participating in this. He does ones where he'll write you into his world and then kill you. And so for an X amount of dollar, you can have yourself or someone you know written into the story and summarily off. So, it's fun. It happens. Yeah. Although I have to say, I can safely say that my family is entirely human and I've never dated a necromancer. So neither one of those two have actually fed into my writing.
I was really hoping you dated a necromancer.
No. I think I would remember that one.
I don't know.
Dated a stranger.
They have the ability. He could probably put a spell on you of some kind, and maybe you just don't remember it.
Who knows? It would have been an adventure one way or the other.
That's right. All right, so changing tactics a little bit. You're on social media. Do you want to tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, so I am on. I'm kind of a social media addict. It's my favorite way to procrastinate. So I'm on Twitter and Facebook and also Instagram, because I do love. Instagram is the most approachable one for me because I can snap a picture real quick and send it everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll mostly find me on Instagram and Facebook, and then I have a newsletter. So if folks are interested in finding out new release information, or I have a short story set in the same world as Death Dancer coming out this summer as part of an anthology of Kindle Press authors. So there are going to be some great short stories set in the worlds of our novels that were Kindle Press books. And that is a free anthology, so it's a great way to sample some new writing.
Okay.
So yeah, to find out about that, the best way to do is either follow me on Facebook or sign up for the newsletter. I don't send out things every week. I'm kind of like when there's something interesting happening, that's when you'll get a newsletter. So don't worry, I won't fill up your email inboxes. I know we're all dealing with an overabundance of email. So yeah, try not to contribute.
Thank you for that. I was just going to make the random comment of, I love your tagline on Twitter. Do you?
Oh gosh, wait a minute.
Do you remember what it is?
I'm blanking.
I write about things that go bump in the night, including headboards.
Yeah. Thank you.
I laughed probably more than I should have at that. But...
thanks, I'm glad you like that. Yeah, I like to say what I write is uber sexy urban fantasy. I mean, who doesn't love a little heat?
Thank you for not using euphemisms.
Oh gosh. Yeah, no.
There was no mention of a throbbing member anywhere. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, readers, you'll be delighted to know there's no members throbbing or, valleys of any kind mentioning. No, I mean, for me, the scenes of coming together are really about character and relationship building. It's very easy to get into insert tab A into slot B and then finding all the flowery language around that to make it sound a little less clinical.
Right.
But I think, I try to get away with the minimum that I need to tell you to give you, the very intelligent reader who is enjoying the novel, the ability to utilize your own words and images to complete the scene.
Okay. Well, on that note.
Now that we've gone there,
right.
I think we're kind of...
Where else can we go? No, thank you so much, really, for joining me. I had so much fun, and I'm looking forward to the short story and the new novel in the fall. Looking forward to both of those. So
yeah. Short story is I'll forget the name of it already, and the novel is going to be Dancer's Flame.
Dancer's Flame. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
All right. My pleasure. Thanks again for having me, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Once again, I'd like to thank my guest, Jasmine Silvera, author of Death's Dancer. I had such fun with this interview. Jasmine, you are a great guest. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast. And for those of you who are listening, I really recommend checking out her book and then the new short story coming out this summer and then Death's Flame that's coming out this fall. So sign up for her newsletter, follow her on social media. I know she would love to hear from you or have you interested in her books. That is all the time that we have for today. Thank you for joining me as we spoke with author Jasmine Silvera. I hope you'll join me again next week. I have another author interview. I'm so excited. I'll be interviewing author Kristen Rockaway about another debut novel, her novel, Wild Woman's Guide to Traveling the World. So I'm excited to speak with Kristen about that. In the meantime, you can find all of our podcasts at www.gsmcpodcast.com. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr. I'd love to hear from you. You can download our podcasts on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and any of the apps that you use for your mobile devices. So as always, thank you for joining me. Please join me again next week when we interview Kristen Rockaway. In the meantime, go get yourself lost in a good book.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.